So the tagline of this movie is, "You can't save the world alone." Probably should have been one step forward, three steps back. So Justice League tells the story of our favorite DC heroes finally uniting in one movie to team up and take on a villain to save the world. Well, the day has finally come, everybody. This has been one of the craziest production stories that I have ever seen with the making of this movie, Justice League. WB basically rushed this thing into production. It started shooting like 2 weeks after BVS came out last year. Then they got all the reception of BVS. They halted production, did massive fast rewrites, altered the entire movie basically, or at least most of the movie, to fit a different tone, to answer a lot of the questions and a lot of the concerns that people had regarding BVS, and really just altered Zack Snyder's vision of what this movie should have been from the get-go. Then months later, Zack Snyder befell a tragedy in his family, unfortunately, and Joss Whedon, the director of Avengers and Avengers Age of Ultron, had to come in and take over to finish this movie. And instead of just doing the post-production, he ended up doing massive reshoots to a degree that we will never honestly know the full degree, but from what I can tell in this movie, it's about 60-40. 60 Zack Snyder and 40 Joss Whedon, which is something that is unheard of. A movie that's literally from two directors. And while that entire production is fascinating all on its own, and I would love to watch a documentary, and I would love, which is probably never going to happen, if they had some kind of massive Blu-ray release with the full uncut Zack Snyder version and the version that we got in theaters that's kind of the mix of the two, so we can compare and contrast at how much the film changed. All of those things honestly just made me worry about this movie, made me concerned about it. It didn't give me faith. It didn't make me think that they were just pulling out all the stops, putting all their resources into this movie to make sure it's the best movie possible. To me, it just screamed chaos, it screamed confusion, it screamed no direction, and it screamed just problems for Justice League. And knowing all that, I walked into this movie with very, very tempered, minimal expectations. And with those expectations in mind, the movie did not disappoint me. It also didn't exactly go above those expectations either. So let's talk about the positives of Justice League. The first thing that I'm going to get into, which is the biggest achievement of this movie, which honestly, at the end of the day, regardless of my criticisms, is the one thing that this movie really needed to nail, and fortunately it does nail, and that's the characters. That's our Batman, Wonder Woman, Aquaman, The Flash, Cyborg, Superman. This movie delivers those characters very well. You enjoy their portrayals, you enjoy the actors, you enjoy the little bits of story you get for the ones that you haven't seen story yet from, like Flash and Aquaman and Cyborg, and you do leave the movie interested in where those characters are going to go, what they're going to do with them in the future. You want to see them again. So ultimately, the movie succeeds in bringing those new characters and bringing back the characters that we've already seen in the DCEU and making you like them even more, making you want to see more from them.
Let's do it. All right.
Talking individually about each of these characters, of course I'll start off with Batman. I've said numerous times, my favorite comic book hero, superhero, whatever you want to call him. Some people argue he's not a superhero. Favorite comic book character of all time is Batman. I love Ben Affleck's portrayal of Batman. Even with all the issues I have with BVS, that was the best part of that movie to me. I've been excited to see what he's going to bring to this. And I got to be honest, probably mostly due to the writing, kind of toning down how dark of a character he is in this and making him more light and fluffy. I didn't love Batman as much in this one. He's still a badass, he's still got some cool scenes, but even after you kind of get away from the dialogue and you get into the big epic battles towards the end of the movie when they're actually fighting the Parademons and fighting Steppenwolf, naturally Batman doesn't have superpowers, so he's kind of reduced to being the guy with the technology. He drives around and shoots shit, he has a little tank that shoots shit, and it's just not as cool or interesting as I know the character of Batman to be. So Batman was actually not as much of a positive in this movie. He's always a positive because he's badass, but he's more reduced down to being kind of the smaller, less effective character in this than he was in Batman v Superman. Moving on to Wonder Woman, everybody is on a big high with this character after her movie knocked it out of the park earlier this year, and I don't think that some of her scenes are as effective as it was in her standalone movie, but she's still a highlight of this team. Gal Gadot is great. She's very cute and sweet and has that kind of hopefulness that a lot of people wanted Superman to be. And she kind of has a little bit of a leader role in this group too, as well as Batman. They're kind of like the co-leaders of this group. And her rapport with Bruce Wayne is the best part of the movie, in my opinion. So Gal Gadot and Wonder Woman is great. You get into some of the newer characters. Jason Momoa as Aquaman was probably my favorite character in the movie, although I want to see a lot more of his character. I don't think the movie gave me enough of him. I like his kind of rebel without a cause feel. I like this. Jason Momoa just has this cool, badass kind of flavor to him. He just looks like the guy that just doesn't give a fuck. Like, he would be awesome to just toss a couple of beers back with and have a good time. He brings all of that to the character of Aquaman.
Ride ain't over yet.
My man.
And Aquaman, you know, on its surface, if you're not a comic book reader, kind of seems like a joke. If you look at some of the old pictures at the orange suit and the green pants and the guy that talks to fish, this is the cool, badass, killer version of Aquaman that I wanted. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what he's going to do in his standalone movie, but Aquaman is a badass in this movie. Then you move on to Flash, played by Ezra Miller, a very different take on this character than Grant Gustin in the CW show that we all know and love, while still being pretty true to who Flash is. He's still kind of the goofy, neurotic guy, the real smart, nerdy kind of side of the character, but he's a lot more he has a lot more tics, and he's a lot more of the comedic relief in this movie. They kind of reduce him down to being the comedic relief, honestly. He's not as much of a superhero in this as I want him to be, and it makes me concerned a little bit for what they're going to do with this standalone movie, because I'll be honest, it didn't really feel like he fought anybody in this movie. It just felt like he kind of zipped around and saved hostages. You have one little small sequence where everything goes slow-mo, and he pushes something towards Wonder Woman, which was very reminiscent of the Quicksilver scene in Days of Future Past and in X-Men Apocalypse. So maybe it's because I've seen those scenes and they're way better. I didn't feel as impressed by what they brought with the Flash as far as his actual fighting and his actual contribution to the team.
It's really cool. You guys seem ready to do battle and stuff, but full transparency, I've never done battle. I've just pushed some people and run away.
But as a character, I think he served well as comedic relief. He served well as having some interesting interaction with Aquaman and especially Cyborg. And I am, again, curious to see what they do in his standalone movie. And then you end on Cyborg, and Cyborg was the big kind of wild card for me because I don't have any experience with the character as far as reading comic books or watching Teen Titans or anything like that. He's a pretty decent character. I don't think that you get enough of him. Again, common theme. But I think that the relationship with him and his father, the whole thing about coming back from the dead and kind of coming back and having this Frankenstein monster style to him where he kind of feels like he's not truly alive and isn't completely who he was and he's more machine than man, that's interesting. But his role in the actual plot of the movie, you can tell was rewritten because we were told from the beginning that Cyborg is one of the 3 mother boxes. And that was a really interesting plot point because you have the villain Steppenwolf, who's basically by the end of the movie going to have to take Cyborg at some point, and you have the team going to have to either try to rescue Cyborg or fight Cyborg, or Cyborg's going to have to sacrifice himself. All these little ideas were playing in my head of how this movie was going to utilize that plot point, and small spoiler alert, it was rewritten. He's not one of the mother boxes in this, and you could tell it's a quick rewrite because whenever it comes down to the 3rd mother box, after the Atlanteans and the Amazonians lose theirs, he goes off to a lab and comes back with a suitcase. All right, here's the 3rd mother box. And I was like, I thought he was the 3rd mother box. Oh, they rewrote it. And this is kind of the quick, easy way to kind of move on. Okay, I see what you're doing here. Should have been more interesting. Should have been a bigger part of the plot point. And I think that his character is good enough for a standalone movie, but if anybody in this team is not going to get their standalone movie, it's going to be Cyborg. Now, the last character I'm going to talk about, I don't give a fuck if you think it's a spoiler or not, because if you watch the trailers to this movie, if you know how the storyline goes, if you watch Batman v Superman, they tell you that Superman is coming back. There's no secret. It's not a spoiler to talk about Superman coming back. Now that I got that out of the way, Superman in this, it's going to be the Superman that a lot of people have been waiting for. He's more the hopeful Superman. He's more kind of the lighthearted Superman. He's not the dark, somber one that we saw in Batman v Superman. And elements of Man of Steel. I think Man of Steel nailed the character pretty well, honestly. But this is going to be a Superman that many fans are going to appreciate seeing. The movie does pick up quite a bit whenever Superman comes into it. It's an interesting way that they bring him back. The initial kind of conflict with him and the team when he does come back is one of the more interesting parts of the movie. But again, like I was talking about with the rewrite with Cyborg, you can also tell that Superman was completely rewritten and completely reshot For one reason I'll talk about later, but the other reason is that black suit Superman that they've been teasing, and Henry Cavill's been posting on Instagram and everybody's been waiting to see in the trailers and everything. Yeah, you don't get it. There's no black suit Superman in this. And that right there tells me that his role initially, including the spots in the trailers whenever you see a mysterious guy approach Alfred, there's scenes that tell you that that black suit storyline is coming. It's not in this. They rewrote it completely. And again, something that I'll talk about again in this review is I'm more curious to see what they would have done with that. I like what they did here, but I think there was a more interesting way that they were going to do it, and I'm morbidly curious to see what that was. One of the biggest things that I enjoyed about this movie is honestly the score. To me, it has a very Batman animated series feel to it, and if you're a fan of that animated series, you're gonna know what I'm talking about, especially through the first half of this movie, and the Gotham scenes in particular. The score that was going on in this movie, I was like, this is cool. This has more of a kind of old school classic DC Comics feel to it. It doesn't feel like this grand operatic kind of score. It has that comic book animated series feel to it. It adds to the tone of the movie. It added to my entertainment value, and I liked it. Another big positive that I'll say, even though that it is glaringly apparent which scenes were reshoot for a reason that I'm going to get into in my negatives, overall, the tone and the flow of the movie, it fits. It doesn't feel jarring. It doesn't feel like all of a sudden we're in a Zack Snyder scene and then it's a brick in the face and now we're in a Joss Whedon scene and then we're back in Zack Snyder and it's all choppy and weird. For the most part, it flows really nicely, and if you didn't know the production issues with this movie, I think 90% of the people out there would swear this was one director's film. And my last positive for the movie is that it's just an easily digestible, entertaining movie. This is popcorn entertainment. This is a movie that's made to go out there, be flashy, entertain you for a quick, very tight 2-hour runtime, and that's what it's trying to do. It's trying to be just fast, easily digestible entertainment, and on that note, it does succeed. It's not going for some grand epic scale. It's not going for some gigantic ambitions. It's not something you have to wrap your mind around and watch a couple of times to kind of pick up all the details. It's very streamlined. It's very easily digestible. For some people, that's exactly what they want from a movie like this. For me, unfortunately, skating into my negatives for this movie, even though it's easily digestible and it's easy, fun entertainment, to me, the movie just feels lifeless. It feels inspirationless. It feels so unambitious to the point where if you compare it to movies like BVS, which is, people hate that movie, and I get it, and there's definitely some issues there, but you cannot tell me that movie does not have ambition, it has a lot of risks, and it has balls with some of the decisions that it goes for. Justice League has none of that. It's all the safe choices. It's definitely WB trying to make a Marvel movie. And don't blast me in the comments section, DC fanboys, but it's the truth. They're trying to make a Marvel-style movie where it's quick, fast, quippy, light, fluffy, humor-filled, and it just doesn't really fit to me. It's entertaining in spots. Overall, it just makes the movie feel so foreign to the DC universe that we've known so far. I've seen a lot of reviews say that Justice League has a lot of problems, but it's a big step in the right direction for where the DC universe should go, and I couldn't disagree more. I don't like that direction that they're going. If this is the direction that all the DC movies are going to be going in, this light, digestible, unambitious, quippy, funny kind of style, I'm not going to like it. It's going to be a poor man's version of what we're getting from other cinematic universes. I want the ambitious, mythic, epic versions that we were getting in the previous DC movies. I just want them to be better. I want them to be tailored a little bit more, spend more time and care into it, give more care to the writing, for God's sakes. Don't just make a knee-jerk reaction and start mimicking what another movie studio is doing and succeeding with, because it's succeeding for different reasons. It's not succeeding because it's light and quippy. It's succeeding because they're taking time with the writing, they're giving it to great directors, they're trusting those directors while reining them in. I'm looking at you, Zack Snyder, but also they have their own style. DC needs to have their own style. Don't take another company's style.
These are air vents. They all lead down to the tunnel to Metropolis project that was abandoned in the 29.
Do you really think that...
Oh, wow, they really just vanished. Huh? Oh, that's rude.
While I was talking about the need to spend more time and care in the writing side of it, the writing issue that DC has had so far carries over into Justice League because, man, it's rough. The story, the plot, Very basic, very uninteresting. They have this mythic guy, Steppenwolf, come down, who's like one of the lieutenants of the eventual big bad, the Thanos of this universe, Darkseid. And I know Darkseid came first. Again, calm down, DC fanboys. I'm just comparing it to the one that everybody knows in pop culture right now as Thanos because of Infinity War coming out. Calm your tits. But anyway, Steppenwolf comes down. He's trying to take over the world with these 3 mother boxes, and now the Justice League has to stop him and get these mother boxes away from him. Very basic, very simple, not the most epic, ambitious, or interesting storyline to bring him in. It's serviceable, but that's about it. And I had a pretty big issue with a lot of the dialogue writing in this movie. I think most of the issues I had honestly came from the rewrites from Joss Whedon, because even though the movie flows, the tone and the style of it, the dialogue are the spots where you can tell which scenes were Zack Snyder and which scenes were Joss Whedon, because Joss Whedon has a very signature style of humor, especially the humor that he implemented into the Avengers. It's the same exact style of humor that he implements here.
Silica-based quartz sand fabric, abrasion resistant, heat resistant.
Yeah, I do competitive ice dancing.
What they use on the space shuttle to prevent it from burning up on re-entry.
I do very competitive ice dancing.
And some of those little light, fluffy lines that come out of some of these characters, especially when it comes from Batman's mouth, it's kind of a brick in the face. You're like, oh yeah, that's a Joss Whedon scene. That's a rewrite, that's a reshoot. And it doesn't really fit, again, with the scene, the cinematic universe that we've known so far. You have this grand, dark, kind of mythic epic in Batman v Superman, and then you come into this and Batman's kind of cracking jokes. He's letting his secrets out left and right. Like, one of the first scenes of the movie is where he meets Aquaman. The scene in the trailers, I heard he talked to fish. And after that, they walk outside. The movie immediately cuts to them having a conversation where at least an hour of dialogue has been cut out, or they're just rushing to get to that scene, and they're walking outside and Aquaman's like, so you've been taking care of Gotham, that shitty little city, for 25 years. Oh, you're dressed like a bat. Well, that's interesting. And to me, it's just like, I don't think Batman would tell him all of that right away. Even though he's trying to recruit him, it feels like there's something missing there. It feels like there's about an hour of, don't fuck with me or I'll destroy your ass, but I'm also the Batman kind of dialogue. And it's to the point where some of that light and fluffiness and kind of MCU style that they inject into this movie kind of feels like departures and betrayals of the characters that we know a little bit, because a lot of the dialogue, mostly from Batman, just feels out of place to me. And I can tell that a lot of it's from Joss Whedon. And ultimately, another negative that I'm going to get into now is all of the reshoots that they did, all of the time that they took to retool this movie and tweak it and change it. I don't think it did the movie any favors. Now, obviously, I don't have the uncut original vision of Zack Snyder to be able to say that definitively, but just my own speculation, I honestly feel like I would have liked that version of this movie more, because all of the stuff that they injected with this, all the rewriting, all of the scenes that you can tell, not only from the trailers that aren't in this movie, but from what we've been hearing about the story and some of the plot of this movie that's just not in the final movie at all, you can tell that so much was changed about this and so much was retooled, reshot, and recut that it's a completely different movie. And speaking of reshoots, apparently every single scene that Superman is in this movie was completely rewritten and reshot by Joss Whedon. And you can tell because that dude's face and upper lip especially is all CGI, and it looks god awful. It is some of the worst and most distracting CGI that I have ever seen in my life. Begging the question why they rushed to make this November release date and didn't just push it back a few months to make sure that the movie actually looked good, because yeah. But for those that don't understand the story behind that, when they decided to do all these massive reshoots, Henry Cavill, the guy who plays Superman, was already shooting Mission Impossible 6, had this big-ass manly mustache, and the people in charge of Mission Impossible 6 said, fuck you, Warner Brothers, we are not having him shave that mustache and put a fake mustache on him the rest of this movie. It's on you to digitally remove that mustache for any scenes that you need Henry Cavill for. And it looks bad. Like, even if you don't know the story behind it, when you look at it, there's some uncanny valley going on where you're like, his face just looks wrong. It looks almost like his upper teeth just kind of stick out a little bit. It looks like the fucking scene in Me, Myself, and Irene. But that's not the only bad CGI. Basically, the majority of the third act, pieces of the second act, anything that Steppenwolf or his parademons are in are completely CGI. And though there are some scenes that look serviceable enough, for the most part, the visual effects in this movie are trash. I mean, for a 2017 movie with a big budget, huge, epic movie like Justice League, it's no excuse to have a movie that comes out where the VFX work looks like something that came out in the late 2000s or even the mid 2000s. I mean, it looks rough. And again, begs the question why you would rush to get this November release date if you don't have enough time for all these reshoots to be completely finished by your VFX crew. There's no excuse for that. But no amount of great CGI work could have hid the fact that the villain in this movie is pretty lame. Steppenwolf is not a good villain at all. He's not the worst villain I've ever seen in a comic book movie. He does have some interesting scenes here and there, but his overall motivations, his overall look, his intimidating factor is not there at all. All of it is just weak. There's not really enough there to make you think this is exactly why the Justice League got together. This merits an epic team-up movie like this to take down this guy. No, Doomsday was more of a threat than this guy. You got Steppenwolf and you got all of his parademons are essentially just going through Earth, through the Themyscira world, the Amazonians, through Atlantis, trying to get these 3 mother boxes. And basically they're just invasion scenes. You get this little portal that comes down, Steppenwolf comes down, parademons start flying everywhere like a little fly swarm. They take the box, they move on. That's pretty much all that Steppenwolf gets to do in this movie. And you never feel like he's anywhere near a threat that this team can't handle him. Especially whenever Superman comes into the fold. You're like, yeah, no, this movie's over. This dude has no chance. And even the parademons themselves, they really introduced them in a really cool way in Batman v Superman with that little nightmare scene. And it made people, especially if you're not a comic book fan, curious of what the hell are these things? And they barely get into it in this movie. It's very quickly introduced in a Gotham scene, and then from then on, they're basically just cannon fodder. They don't do anything intimidating, they aren't scary, they aren't really any kind of a threat to add to Steppenwolf, like just the numbers of them make Steppenwolf more of a threat than he should be. You don't feel that at all, they're just there. But in the end, the thing that I kind of want to touch on as a closing note for my negatives is honestly just the decisions and the direction that they went with this movie from the get-go. Deciding to jump right into the team-up movie without having an Aquaman standalone, a Flash standalone, a Cyborg standalone, a Batman standalone. To me, that was a gigantic mistake. I had faith at first. I didn't think that there was impossibility of being able to do a Justice League movie without having those characters, because we've seen movies where they introduce 5 or 6 characters we've never seen and they have a short runtime and it works out great. You get attached to all the characters, you understand enough of them to be invested, you like them, you don't feel like there's missing shit. But Justice League is anything but that, and these characters are so grand, so epic, and have so much storyline behind them that to me, it was a crime to not get into some of that storyline before you got into Justice League. Because if we knew who Aquaman was, we knew what Atlantis was, we knew who Cyborg was, we knew Central City and the Flash, we got to see Batman in a couple adventures, maybe even just one of them before or after Batman v Superman, and then you get into Justice League, you don't have to waste any time in this movie trying to introduce characters. You just show up, you team them up, we're all on speed, we're all on par with it because we've seen the previous movies, and now you can spend time telling a great story and giving a good, epic, deservable reason to get these characters together to fight in this Justice League. To me, the decision not to do that really hurt this movie from the get-go. And I'm sorry, I know there's people out there that have the opinion that they could have done it without doing the standalone movies. To me, I don't see any scenario where they could have, because they've done everything they possibly could to make this movie the best movie that they could have. They've had 2 different directors work on it. It's been reshot, rewritten over and over and over again, and we still get a complete mess. And again, it sucks that I have to keep putting out this little PSA, this little bit of a disclaimer out there. I'm not saying that they have to do exactly what MCU has done, but the fact that we have a team-up movie where half the team we know nothing about, we know nothing about their story, we know nothing about the Warner Brothers versions of these characters, it just weighs down this movie even more and draws flaws to the movie that we could have already gotten this out of the way with standalone movies and spent more time and more care into making Justice League the big badass epic that I think it should have been and I think it could have been. One of the main negatives that I walked away thinking in this movie, which I still kind of wrap my mind around now, there's no really big, grand, epic, memorable sequence in this movie. There's not one scene that stands out in my mind as, that's the scene I'll remember this movie for. That's the scene I'll rewatch this movie for. Whenever people see this, that's the scene they're going to be talking about. You don't have that. You don't have a warehouse fight like you did in Batman v Superman. You don't have a Metropolis fight like you had in Man of Steel. There's just nothing there. It's very kind of bland in a lot of the scale and a lot of the ambition that they have with this. It's just a very vanilla movie. And to me, you need some epic scenes. You need something really memorable and tangible and something that is going to put a stamp on the comic book movie universe that Justice League did that. Justice League got that right. And I just don't have that with this movie. I still wrap my mind around it. There's nothing in this movie that I honestly just, yeah, that scene stands out to me. There's nothing. But all in all, guys, this movie is good enough. It's serviceable. It's a movie that I don't hate. It's not the worst we've gotten out of the DCEU. It's not the worst that we've gotten this year as far as comic book movies, but it's just a disappointment to me that Justice League, we finally have it. This big epic team up that we have been anticipating for years is here. And the word that I have to use to describe it is serviceable. That's a disappointment. Should have had a lot more time and care into it. Should have been taken more seriously from the get-go instead of being retooled and tweaked and doing a lot of cleanup and damage control throughout the entire production of this movie, because it shows. You get a vision from two different directors that do flow into one cohesive movie, thank God. You get some really good character moments. You get good character interactions, good character introductions, and I do want to see where these characters go. I'm interested enough, and that's the movie's biggest accomplishment, to get me into the seats of the next movies, the Aquaman, the Flash, Cyborg, a Justice League 2. I will be there, but they need to fix the problems that they had in this movie. Horrible CG, really bad villains, no ambitions, no scale, and for the love of God, Warner Brothers, please just stick with your own style. Do not try to mimic the style of the MCU, because me personally, I don't know if I speak for most fans out there, it does not work. So if you're a DC fan, if you're a comic book fan, I do think this movie is worth checking out, but I don't think it's anything you should rush out and throw a bunch of money down to see, especially with how bad and unfinished the VFX work is. So wait, have a little bit of patience, and check out Justice League on Netflix. So what did you guys think of Justice League? Did you love this movie? Do you love the direction they went? And do you feel like the more tight, unambitious, and quickly, easily digestible scale that they brought to this, and the quippy, light humor, is the style that you want to see going forward in the DCEU? Or to me, do you feel like that is totally the wrong direction that they need to go, and they just need to spend more time and care on the scripts and give more care to the movies themselves? Don't try to take the style from somebody else. Have your own style. What is your thoughts on Justice League? Put them all down in the comment section below, guys. Please like and share this video. Hit that subscribe button if you're not already a subscriber. If you want to check out some of my social media links, I've got Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter down in the video description below, as well as the link to my Patreon page, which is a great way to help this channel grow and to give back to this channel, but also get awesome exclusive rewards for your eyes only. So check that out, guys. And if you want to check out some more of my videos, you can check out a few more by clicking right over here.